Hey everybody, and welcome once again to Time Out with Kevin Gallagher. I'm, of course, your host, and it's a pleasure to have you here at the news desk. And what that means is that our guest is far away, and that is no exception. Here we have, once again, Jonathan Gray, who is a biblical archaeologist. He's joining us all the way from New Zealand, actually out in tomorrow. It's around 12:30 in the afternoon tomorrow from where I'm sitting, where he is. And we are into part 3. We're going to be looking at the zodiac sign of Libra and how that fits into the bigger picture about what we've been talking about in this series by looking at the zodiac itself. Now, Jonathan, I want to thank you once again for being on the program all the way from tomorrow. And hello once again. How are you?
Fine, Kevin. Nice to be with you again.
Thank you so much. And why don't you do a quick review of what we've been looking at and tell people a little bit about the zodiac itself, a little bit about perhaps how you have gotten into researching it, and let's jump right into the star sign of Libra.
Okay. Well, that's a very good idea, just to do a quick overview. The word zodiac comes from an ancient Hebrew word meaning a way by steps, and it refers actually to the stages of the sun going around the sky in the course of a year, as seen from this earth, against the background of the stars. If you could see the stars at the same time as you could see the sun in the daytime, there would be a particular constellation each different month behind the position of the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Now, very early in human history, the stars were named and they were arranged into constellation groups and drawn on sky charts as pictures of animals, people, and other objects.
Right.
They were consistent throughout the world. And they've survived, for the most part, on astronomical charts right to our day, Kevin. Now, the constellations of the zodiac refer to a belt of stars in the sky, about 16 degrees wide, encircling the Earth, through which the sun appears to pass each year.
Right.
And each stage of the yearly cycle contains its own group of stars. There are 12 signs of the zodiac, and each sign is accompanied by 3 adjacent signs, which we call decans or pieces, which explain the main sign. And so we have a well-ordered and a numbered set of 48 signs. That's 12 groups of 4. Now, the world has really looked in vain for the origin of these hieroglyphics, and current attempts to explain their origin are absolutely absurd with no evidence, and astrologers are at a loss to tell us what the origin of the star signs is. In fact, the star signs predate astrology by about 4,000 years, so astrology is not the way we go if we want to know what the stars are all about and the star signs.
There it is.
Now, without dating them today again, I think we dealt with that earlier, we can determine the age of the oldest maps, and they relate to where the star positions were from Earth, as seen from Earth about 6,000 years ago. And they recorded a prophecy.
Right.
And the prophecy was actually related to what they all understood to know, that this Earth had been hijacked by a serpent representing the devil, but that a virgin's baby would come down, he would fight the serpent, defeat him, and bring life, peace, and happiness back to mankind.
Right. And
the pictures were set in sequence to tell that story. It was an important prophecy. And so really, in a nutshell, what we have here is a star map, thousands of years old, overlaid with pictures and names, and predicting a world deliverer.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was all about. That's the theme of it.
Yeah, and what I find interesting reading through your publication called The Sting of the Scorpion is that a lot of people had talked about the fact that they thought that people were worshiping many gods and it went down to one god, but from what you're saying in your publication is that it actually started out the opposite way around. They all understood that there was this one God and this one Redeemer that was coming, and the many gods then sprang out over time through that. It corrupted. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct, Kevin. It's a popular fallacy about the origin of the gods that some people have, but the truth is that the tendency is always to increase rather than decrease.
Right.
The history shows definitely that monotheism was the way the whole world understood God in the past, and we've got tremendous amount of archaeological evidence. It's indisputable.
Can you discuss a little bit of that evidence that you've come across?
Well, yes. What we have is, around the world today, we have evidence of a one language being spoken globally. We have evidence in Australia, in Yemen, in Israel, in North America, and Asia and other places that the whole world once spoke one language. Now, when we look at the letters and the hieroglyphics associated with this ancient one language that appears to have been global, we find that they did worship what they called the one creator of the universe. And they called him by the same names as the Hebrews do today.
Right.
El and Yah and so on, the various aspects of the God's character. Now, it's very interesting to note that take Hinduism, for example. Hinduism started out by acknowledging a one only God.
Mm-hmm.
Got it in the earliest writings.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And today there are it's estimated something like 60,000 different gods for different purposes in the Hindu world. So there has been an explosion from one to multiples. And the same goes for Egypt and for other cultures that we can study archaeologically. Archaeology, of course, is a very precise science, and we deal with facts that can be seen, handled, and even smelt sometimes. It's the most exact science we have in the world, and we don't have to interpret it. We just have to look at what it's telling us and say, okay, I accept it or I don't accept it. It's fact.
Right. It's pretty interesting the way you bring that stuff up, because what comes to my mind is with Paul, it's either in the book of Acts or the book of Romans, I forget which, but he says that he's going to testify about the unknown God, because they had so many gods and it was a crime to talk about a God that didn't exist. So he said, I'm going to explain to you the unknown God.
God was the one that they weren't talking about.
Yes, so it was quite amusing. Why don't we get into Libra and just get into great detail, if you can, please, about this star sign. Break it down. Get into the deacons, which are those sub-signs. And I'm gonna be quiet and let you really get into this and really explain for the people watching at home what this sign, means and its significance, et cetera, et cetera. So the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Now, Libra, of course, continues on from Virgo, which is the first of the star signs, and we dealt with that in our last program. In essence, what we're dealing with here with Virgo and Libra and the next two signs that follow is the promised deliverer. All about his person and what he would do and how he would finally triumph. That is true of Virgo with its three side pieces that explain it, and this is also true of Libra.
Right.
Now, Virgo, the theme of Virgo was the seed who was going to be born to be bruised.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the theme of Libra is the price that he would pay. And so here we have a pair of balances. That's what Libra is. It's a pair of balances. And the position of the beam, which is very, very sensitive, so that you put a feather on it and it will alter the balance between one side and the other, is actually telling about the fortunes of the characters that are being pictured in Libra and its three explanatory signs.
Okay.
In a vast and a horrible battle. And the whole instrument of the scales in operation shows that eternal justice is being weighed against the two sides. On the downside of the scales, it points toward the deadly serpent, Scorpio, which we'll deal with at a later time.
Right.
And in some zodiacs, the bowl on the left side is held by the scorpion's claws, but in other signs where they've varied it slightly, the claws occasionally intrude onto the place of the scales. Now, in the Persian zodiac, there's a person lifting these balances in one hand and grasping a lamb with the other.
Huh.
And this, of course, is in essence hieroglyphically telling us that the price to be paid, the price to be measured out in the scales, is to be the life of a lamb.
Interesting.
We'll get into the lamb aspect later, but that's something worth bearing in mind.
Right.
Now, other names for the star sign are an Arabic word, al-zubina, which means purchase or redemption or gain. Then there's a Coptic Egyptian word, Lombardia, which means the gracious branch. And there's two typical words which, translated into English, tell us that there's going to be a price paid and there's going to be a graciousness giving of something by that price that's paid. Now, star names of Libra reflect this very same idea. On one side of the scales, there's a star whose name means the price deficient. And on the other side, there's a star which means the price that covers. And you've got the same Hebrew word repeatedly used in the Bible, which is always translated into the English as atonement or covering of our sins. Now, there's another star, Zubin Akrabi, which translated into English simply means the price paid in the conflict.
Wow.
Now, just comparing this with the scripture, it's very interesting. We're told in Psalm 62, verse 9, that men are laid in the balance. In the book of Daniel, weighed in the balances and found wanting.
Right.
So we are deficient, and we need somebody to pay the price to make up our deficiency. In fact, the word sin means missing the mark.
Yes.
So we're deficient in our perfection or in our character because of sin, and the Lamb is coming. He's going to pay the price, and he's going to make up the difference. Isn't that a wonderful promise?
I had, just as a brief explanation, too, that word for sin that's used, I believe, in the Greek, if my memory is correct, is a word that was actually used in archery. It meant when the arrow didn't hit the bullseye, it missed the mark.
Exactly. I'm glad you brought that out. It brings it to life to sort of express that.
It's actually used in a sporting term, which I found to be really mind-blowing.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah. Continue, please.
So sin is like a debt. It misses the mark. I mean, the mark or the amount that is expected is missed. We fall short of it. Just like 6 falls short of 7. And it's interesting that in ancient terminology, in the Bible itself, 7 means perfection, 6 means man in sin.
Right.
So when we sin, we are not perfect. We're falling short. We're missing the mark. We are not paying the full amount, and we can't. We cannot do it. We need somebody to do it for us, and this is what it's all about.
Right, and this is where this star sign comes in.
Pays the difference for us, and we are, as it were, redeemed back to God by his shed blood. That's the price that's paid.
That's very, very cool. Continue, please.
Now, around Libra, there are 3 other explanatory signs. The first of them is crux, which means the price is the cross endured. Now, the cross is the price at which the redemption was to be bought. And crux stands directly in the path of Centaurus, which we dealt with last week, who is the sin offering, who sacrifices himself, and then connects with Libra, which is the price of redemption. Now, the Hebrew name for crux is the word Edom, which means the cutting off. And cutting off is a term used biblically for violent death. And its Coptic name, Sarah, means triumph by a great conflict. So there's a conflict involved in which the deliverer is going to be violently killed. Now, in all nations in ancient times, the cross was a symbol of victory, life, and immortality through sacrifice. And, of course, the pagans counterfeited that and made it a symbol of the sun god.
Right.
Everything beautiful gets spoiled by the enemy. But appropriately, this sign, which is today called the Southern Cross, we see it here from New Zealand and from the Southern Hemisphere, but in the Northern Hemisphere it has now disappeared because of the movement of our Earth in the solar system across the face of the star background over thousands of years. The Southern Cross was last seen on the horizon of Jerusalem about the time Jesus was crucified. Isn't that interesting?
That's very cool. So it fell below the horizon where it could not be seen in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
At that point in time. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So please continue.
Okay. Now, in biblical prophecies, in foretelling the violent death of the coming Messiah, both Daniel and the prophet Isaiah used the very same expression that we find in Crux, that he will be cut off out of the land of the living. Daniel says he shall be cut off, Messiah shall be cut off. And he gives the actual date in Daniel chapter 9, verse 26. It's very, very interesting study, that prophecy. Isaiah 53, which is recognized widely as a prophecy pointing to the coming Messiah, it says he will be cut off out of the land of the living. So there is the biblical parallel with the star sign, which has him being killed. He's cut off.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the next star sign is lupus, which means the victim slain. And this is a star sign that was also known as victima. And a victim, we have here a victim pierced and slain by Centaur himself. Now, Centaur is one that is dual-natured, and we did deal with that earlier, Centaurus, or Centaurus, where you have him, a double-natured being. He's also a sacrificial animal, and yet he's great and powerful and beneficent. And he's piercing, this is going back to our previous show, he's piercing with his lance the heart of some victim. Now, in this role, he's shown as both the sacrifice and the offerer of the sacrifice. And we do know that when the Messiah came, he declared that no man would take his life, he would lay down his own life. He came for that purpose, to sacrifice himself. And he became both the offerer of the sacrifice and the sacrifice. So that's the dual nature of the victim.
Right.
He is the one who offers himself, and he is also the one that is offered.
Okay, please continue.
Well, anciently, the sign was called, this sign lupus, the victim slain, was called surah. That's in the Arabic, and it means the lamb. It's also called in the Hebrew asidah, and also asidaton in the Arabic, which both mean to be slain. So we've got here the lamb that is to be slain. That's the symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
Now in Egypt it was depicted as a youth who was said to be the coming one. And he had his finger on his lips as if signaling silence. Now, it's very interesting that as Jesus went to his death, before his accusers, he remained silent. We have that in the Gospels, that his accusers brought him as a lamb to the slaughter, but in fact, Isaiah predicts this. Mm-hmm. He says, he shall be brought as a lamb to the slaughter, yet he opened not his mouth. That's Isaiah 53:7.
Yep.
And then before his accusers, he was again silent, as Mark chapter 15, verses 3 to 5 tells us. And then Philippians, one of my favourite passages of how he humbled himself from being the great God down to become a man sacrificed on a cross, the worst form of death. And Philippians chapter 2 says he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even the death of the cross.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it was in John chapter 1 where Jesus said, I lay down my life for the sheep. I lay it down of myself. So he willingly submitted to death. And as he was falsely accused, he opened not his mouth. And so in the zodiac, the Egyptian one in particular is very expressive of that. His finger is on his lips as if signaling silence. He's not going to speak.
Interesting.
He's going to allow himself to be killed. as the victim.
Now, what about the next deacon in there? I think it's Corona?
Corona, yes. That's the third one. And very aptly, the Southern Cross connects with this corona, which is the Northern Crown, as it's sometimes called. And this is the final reward the victim will receive. And that, of course, fits in with what we're told in the Scripture. Hebrews 2, verse 9 says, Paul is writing, he says, we see Jesus now crowned with glory and honor because of the death he suffered.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very perfect. He suffered death, and the reward was the crown of glory and honor. And that's what Corona is all about. So what do we have? We have the price being paid. We can't pay the price. We can't earn our way to salvation. We need someone to pay the price for us, and that's what the scales is all about. And the scales is uneven. One is up and one is down, and,
right.
and the downness is us. And the price to be paid is by the deliverer, the Lamb, who is going to be sacrificed on a cross, and he gives himself to be brought as a lamb to a slaughter, and he's silent before his accusers, and finally his reward will be to be crowned with glory and honor because of the death he suffered. That's what this wonderful sign, the three side pieces, is all about, Libra.
That is so incredible. It just really, the more I look into this and I prepare for shows each week and I look at your writing, it just blows me away that, you know, each one of these stars that are in these constellations have their own story to tell, if you understand what I mean. That the name of the star itself, these names go back thousands and thousands of years, even before the Christ, and it's all just sitting there, you know, waiting, you know, for somebody to come along and say, look, it's been sitting there all this time, and I'm really glad you're able to do that.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It just lifts my spirits every time my mind goes onto the subject. Likewise, Kevin.
Now, you know, give me a little bit of background or maybe a look forward into Scorpio and how this maybe connects, you know, into Scorpio so we can prepare for what people will see in the next segment. Yeah,
sure. Well, what we've got here is, first of all, we've got Virgo, the seed to be born, to be bruised. Then we have Libra, the price to be paid. Then Scorpio, the son of Scorpio, is all about the struggle between him and the enemy that's hijacked this planet. And we've got a wounding in the conflict, which is all about Scorpio, the main sign. And the three side pieces are serpents, the serpent enemy who's going to fight with him. Then there's Ophiuchus, which is the deliverer restraining the serpent. And then he comes in as Hercules, the vanquisher of evil. And he has the serpent in his hands, and he's about to strike that serpent head with a club, with his club. So it's the battle between the deliverer and the serpent. There's a huge amount of suffering involved in this one, but there's great victory at the end of it.
And these that we're looking at, there's a set of four, right? There's four sets of four, and they help tell this complete story, correct?
Yes, they do. And these first four main signs with their side pieces, their theme is all centered on the promised deliverer, his person himself, what he will do, the work that he will need to achieve, the favor he will bestow upon those that are calling out for help, how he will endure the conflict, and how he will finally triumph. And that's the theme of every one of these first four signs, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius. The theme is all about the promised deliverer.
And then what happens in the next four?
Made certain.
What happens in the next four?
And after that come the next four, who are the rescued ones. They are the fruit of the deliverer's work. And these, the next four, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries, speak of the history of the ones that he is going to rescue and the destiny of those that he is going to rescue. His death makes possible their life. A flow of blessings will come from him to them. The blessings they enjoy will be in the midst of their suffering, but his people will be released from that, finally.
And what about the last set of four?
And the last set of four is Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, and Leo with their three side pieces each. And that refers to the culmination of everything. The first 4 deal with the promised deliverer, the next 4, the rescued ones, and finally, the last 4, the judgment period and the consummation. And this deals with the fact that he's going to return as judge, his people will reign with him, and all possessions will now be safe from the conflict, and the enemy will be defeated. And they'll triumph over him.
It's amazing. What for you would be the main lesson or the main thing that you would want people to take from looking at Libra, this one zodiac? What is the main thing you want to drive home that you want people to remember after this broadcast?
Right. The one thing I'd like to remember is that we can't, by our own good deeds, excuse ourselves and say that I'm acceptable to God because I support the Red Cross or something. It's our own works cannot save us. We're deficient. The price that our Lord requires in the coming perfect new earth is perfect people, and only the deliverer can make up the difference, and he can give us power to become like him.
Fantastic. And also, how can people get in touch with you if they wanted to get more information about Sting of the Scorpion or any more information like that in the minute that we have left?
Probably the easiest way, Kevin, would be, the easiest one to remember is the website at beforeus.com, beforeus.com, and then they'll find my email address right there, and they can email me about any questions they might have.
That's fantastic. So it's beforeus.com, beforeus.com. That's beforeus.com. And Jonathan Gray, thank you so much for joining me here once again. Next week, folks, we'll be looking at the star sign of Scorpio and seeing how that fits into the overall zodiac picture. Jonathan Gray, thank you very much for joining me here this week. For Jonathan Gray, I'm, of course, Kevin Gallagher. So please tune in again next week to see what it is we'll be talking about. Until then, have a great night.